Hello and welcome to episode 365 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. This is the, I think, third day of me faking the energy and the opening here because still actually feeling under the weather. For those of you that reached out, it's not serious. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. I am only saying this really much, not to complain, not to get your sympathy, although I really appreciate it. It means a lot. But just to let you know, that's why I'm not doing the opening news and I'm not slacking off. You just don't want to hear me sneeze and cough and snot my way through an opening. So I'm going to get to these guests here on the last show of this week, and I hope that you enjoy them because I've been able to at least do the interviews this week, and I'm very happy with today's. I have two excellent guests joining me. Coming up, I've got Sarah Posner, whose book Unholy is now out in paperback. So good. All about Republicans, the religious right, how they came to support Trump, and what it all means after he is now, well, quote, gone, at least not in the White House, although I hear he is being reinstated. And speaking of reinstated, it's back. It is Christian Finnegan. I mean, it's Finnegan Fridays. He's back. After, I think, 3 weeks off, or was it only 2 weeks? Either way, he just had open heart surgery, and he joined me to talk honestly and openly and hilariously about it all on the run-up to it, during it, and even, of course, since it. So, really happy to have Christian back here on a Friday. Thank you very much for joining me again. Sorry I didn't get the news done this week. Hopefully I'll be feeling better. Sorry I didn't do the hangout. Enough with the apologies. You don't need them. I appreciate your support. So here we go right now with one of my favorite comedians who's all of his comedy specials you got to see. He's so great on Twitter, at Christ Finnegan. He just had open surgery, but he is back. It's Finnegan Fridays with the great Christian Finnegan. Well, he took a couple weeks off because he was
lazy.
He's a quitter.
He's lazy.
He's a lazy quitter. And he went and got himself open heart surgery, which was something that...
just for laughs.
Was it elective? Welcome back, Christian Finnegan. It is great to see you. How are you feeling? Tell everybody what the surgery you had was and what it was for.
Well, I think as I mentioned before the surgery, I had a condition called macropenis.
Oh, that's right.
And
I don't know how I forget that.
I don't know why you'd forget that.
You got to shrink it. It's like breast
it's a joke
reduction.
I've now said twice, and it already feels run into the ground.
No, it's great. Again, please.
I had an aortic aneurysm, which basically just means that the aorta, which is the main artery coming out the top of your heart, was expanding at a relatively dangerous rate. It was larger than it should have been. And so they went in and hacked a part of that aorta. They sawed through my breastbone, and they took a chunk of the aorta and replaced it with like a fake sort of Gore-Tex-y kind of thing. And they also cleaned up the valve. I have a weird valve. Like most people, the valve in their heart looks like a Mercedes symbol. Like you have basically three flaps that open and close. I have what they call a bicuspid as opposed to a tricuspid.
More of a
valve.
Hyundai.
Yes, more of a like just a circle with a line straight down, like just a half and half type deal. And so that was probably the reason why I had the issue in the first place. And so they clean that all up, and now I am zippered back up and on about 14 different pharmaceuticals. Has not stopped me from eating crap, though.
Oh, really? Well, first of all, this is a genetic situation. Like you had this issue in your family even with your brother, right? And so,
well, I've had both of my brothers passed away from heart related issues, and my mother passed away having a surgery very similar to the one I had. She passed away on the operating table. And yet what I had is different than what any of them had, which was very strange. So it's just a whole heart generality, kind of the Finnegans are a bad batch. Let's put it that way.
Well, in the run up to it, we talked obviously almost every week. And I mean, I just can't imagine, we talked about it, how you dealt with it. But How did it go, the last 48 hours before the surgery? How were you feeling on the way in? What was your anxiety like?
I mean, I feel like by the time of the week of the surgery, I just kind of was ready to get going with it, because I had been told by my surgeon that the success rate was very high. So it wasn't a particularly intricate surgery. A friend of mine referred to it as a high stakes tonsillectomy, which is not too far from the truth. That, other than the fact that a dude's hand was in my body,
not the first time,
just different end, but that it was reasonably a straightforward thing. Other than the fact that in the back of my mind, there's this Finnegan curse.
Yeah.
Whereas the surgeon would be telling me, it's like, oh, this is a standard surgery. I do this all the time. It's like, yes, but you don't know that my family is cursed and that will affect things. I'm a little embarrassed by this, but I think that it was a responsible thing to do. I did write and schedule a few emails to my dad and my mother, my dad rather. Oh my God, Freud, my dad and my wife, just in case things went awry, which I hastily deleted when I came to.
I didn't even know you could schedule email. Like it was going to be sent.
Yeah. On Gmail, if you have Gmail, okay, you can basically post date an email.
Oh man, that must have been hard to do.
It was a little weird. It was hard to do just because, that it's not, that the chances of it being relevant are infinitesimal. It's not, there was the logical part of my brain knew that no one would ever see this. But I just, there was that ever so small chance. And I didn't want to not have something in writing, just I love yous and all that stuff. So, but yes, once I had already put an alarm in my phone, just like cancel emails, just like every day after the surgery, I just to remind myself, because like that would be the worst. It's just like 10 days after, as I'm annoying my wife while convalescing at the apartment, she gets some like beyond the grave email from me.
Does she know that you wrote that email? Because I'd be like, I still want to see it. I want to see what you wrote.
I know that I already deleted it just because it's like, I don't, no.
So how did it go? How did the surgery go?
It was good. I mean, like I was saying, but by the time the surgery happened, I was very eager for it to happen. But also it's like my dad was coming into town and I love my dad. My dad's, my last remaining family member and I love him to death. But still, he's an older man and he comes with his own fragilities and issues. And it was maybe a little more stress than I was interested in having the day before going into surgery.
Right.
My dad called me from the train from Boston to tell me that he was having a dental emergency the day before I went to the hospital. So I had to call around and find some urgent care dental place near Penn Station for him to urgently go seek dental care. And that felt a little bit like, come on, man. You just come
exactly. Like that's all you need before solving that problem. Oh man, more problems.
It probably kept me from getting too existential about things. But, as far as the surgery itself goes, it's funny. One of the things that set me at ease about the whole thing is I don't know if I mentioned this when we talked a few weeks ago, but the New York Times was doing like an advertorial about my surgeon.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it was something initiated by Mount Sinai. They were following my surgeon around for a day, taking pictures and writing about him. And they wanted to follow him through the process of one surgery. And they asked if I would be willing to be that surgery. And that did actually genuinely set me at ease, because it's like, all right, well, they're not going to fuck this guy over by, it's like, they're not going to put him in a position where they're going to, like, clearly they think this is going to be successful, or else they wouldn't have picked me, but it was weird, because as I'm being rolled down to the operating room, to have just some weird long-haired Australian photographer guy sort of taking pictures like it was a red carpet, that I was a step and release. And he told me when I was being discharged 5 days later, he he was taking pictures then as well. And he told me, and I have no memory of this, and you're a comic, so you understand what this is like. He said the entire time I was in the operating room, I was just cracking jokes. I was making jokes, making jokes.
That's awesome.
And then I was just out.
Ha!
And I have no memory of that at all.
Do any of those jokes make the article? Like, and Christian was...
We'll see.
They have to. I mean, of course they do, because if you write an article, you want it to be interesting and entertaining, and why wouldn't they?
But it's about my surgeon. It's not really about me. And so I don't know if my hilarious graveside humor will make the final edit. But did
he tell you what any of the joke? What was it about? Like,
he didn't remember. You know, he's a civilian. He's not a comic, so it's like it wouldn't have occurred to him to be like, oh yeah, that's a solid bit. But it's just strange because I have no memory of that whatsoever.
I had 2 minor surgeries and did something similar. Vasectomy.
Yeah, it's
and
purely a defense mechanism.
Yeah, yep. But I offended a guy. I told, I remember a nurse, there's a black male nurse with a big, thick mustache. And I said to him, "You like the black Magnum PI?" And nobody laughed. Like, nobody thought it was. And I was like, what's wrong with me? And then I was like, I probably would have said that even if I wasn't under. I'm such an obnoxious prick. So how about now? Like, when you came out, what was it like to, like, do you remember, or were you so drugged up when you come out?
Well, my surgery, it started at like 9:30 in the morning, and I think I woke up at like 11 o'clock that night. And by then visiting hours were over and stuff. And so I just was in some weird room, and I was probably only awake for 45 seconds before I fell asleep again. And, I knew it had gone well, but, I will say, man, it is so insane how quickly things got better. Within 24 hours, they had me up walking. And within 5 days, I was walking by myself without assistance. The last couple of days I was in the hospital,
how many days were you in the hospisptal?
5, 6 total. I checked in on Tuesday and discharged the following Monday. And the last couple of days I was in the hospital, I had this just absurd and palpable sense of elation, which is not common to me.
What do you think? Well, how do you explain it?
Well, I mean, I hate that cliches are cliches for a reason. I always like to think that, I am different, but I remember the first time I was able to get out of a chair and go to the bathroom and just wash my hands in the sink. And I just started bawling. It was just such an incredibly revelatory moment, and just the little things. And that has dissipated quite a bit since I left the hospital. But I will say that there is a feeling I have had since I got out that is different from me. Whereas the positive aspects of my life feel I'm very sensitive to them right now. My life is in most ways the same as it was before my surgery, but the positive parts of my life feel very immediate and very sensate. And the negative parts feel a bit remote and vague, and who gives a shit. Whereas before it was the exact opposite. The parts of my life that felt like a challenge, or the sort of struggles that I've been having, or failures that I perceive to have had, or whatever, felt very real and very immediate. And I felt them very deeply. In the positive things, I would be able to acknowledge that they were there, but I didn't feel them at all. Now I feel the exact opposite.
I don't.
I hope it lasts, but if it doesn't, I'm not gonna punish myself if I stop feeling that way.
Good, that's smart.
I'm just enjoying it while I have it.
But is there any? Do you attribute that to anything? Is it that kind of not? Now I'll make a cliche that kind of like, a renewal on life, a gratefulness, a second lease.
I think so. I mean,
because open heart. You can sit here and you can talk about the percentages of success, but the truth is, you knew that there was something wrong. I remember we were talking about this, and you went and got checked out, and also the genetic issue, and you went and got it checked out, and sure enough, you needed open heart surgery. I don't care what anybody says, especially in your situation where your mom passed away. I mean, there's just so much there, and I just have to wonder that now that it's over, doesn't matter who you were on the run up to it, whatever your practice was, it's over. It was a success, and it would seem that, and maybe you even will. I don't know how much it was bothering you day to day. It was affecting you, but a lot of times people have surgery like this, and things just feel better, breathing easier, just feeling physiological.
First of all, that sensation that I'd been having for the past year, I don't feel it. And obviously I feel a lot of discomfort in other ways. Like I have a giant incision on my chest, and that hurts, every 6 hours or so, it starts to hurt until I have my medicine and all those things. And I'm still having breathing, I get tired really quickly. And when I walked a mile yesterday, which is pretty nuts. Yeah.
Wow.
I walked a half a mile to this convenience store down the street where I'm upstate convalescing, and it was fine. I mean, it was, by the time I got home, I was ready to fucking not be walking anymore. But in 2 weeks ago, a dude's hand was in my body. For fuck's sake.
Your chest was wide open. And that's
another thing. This photographer, it's one thing for my surgeon to have seen inside my body. It's very weird to me that just some random guy has seen my heart and lungs.
Do you get to see those pictures?
Eventually, I'm sure.
Will you want to see those pictures?
I'm sorry?
Will you want to? Some people might not want to.
I want to see. I did tell them to make sure that I didn't want any pictures where my heart looked fat.
You asked for special lighting?
Specifically, it's just from certain angles, please. Just
the good side of it.
Well, and that was another thing. It's like I kind of was expecting, of course they gave me the pamphlet of like heart healthy foods and stay away from sodium and all that. But the fact is, my heart itself is apparently super healthy.
Right.
It's just the aorta that was the problem. And so there really weren't any dietary issues, which is good and bad because I'm a fat piece of crap. And so I kind of was hoping that they'd be like, you have to, change your entire lifestyle, which I should do anyway. But yeah, my surgeon specifically told me, he's like, don't go on a diet right now. Like, eat healthy, sure, but you need calories and protein to heal and stuff like that. And so I'm assuming milk duds have calories and protein.
Yes, for sure. Yes. What was the experience like in the hospital? Let's cut to the chase. How much material did you get from this whole experience?
I think I've got a good little chunk. I wasn't as diligent. There were a couple of times it was like, I really need to be like writing material right now. And then I thought to myself, you know what, just
give yourself
this experience. And it was interesting, the way you have to, first of all, the lack of the stripping away of all dignity and personal vanity that you have, that I'm, pissing into a plastic thermos in front of some Ukrainian woman who I've met 3 minutes ago.
Why did you have to piss? Why did you have to do it in front of her?
Well, I called her in for it.
Oh,
no, but just you just
Olga,
you're just peeing and people just walk in the room, and you think that would make you, oh God, give me a minute. And after day 3, you're just like, yep.
You're wearing one of those hospital gowns the whole time with the back open thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, they had to shave my pubes, which
why?
Because in case the tube they had going to my heart, like in case the drainage tube or the catheter or whatever, if on the operating table they need to do like an emergency catheter where they'd have to go through the groin or something like that. They do a lot of. They also shave my calves and my chest. Like they shaved a lot, and I felt like just a giant piece of fresh mozzarella the entire time, just wet and clammy and white.
Did you think of doing it yourself ahead of time? Because when I got my vasectomy, I shaved mine ahead of time.
Well, the worst thing about the shaving of the pubes. I'm sorry.
When I got my vasectomy, sorry to keep comparing myself, but I shaved my pubes ahead of time and I cut myself, and then I was embarrassed because I'd never done that. Yeah. And I was like, sorry, I cut myself. And they're like, why did you do it? We would have done it. And I was like, get a free haircut.
It's because you were trying to shave it into the shape of a heart. And
how did you know that? I never told anybody that. How did you know that?
I have my sources.
Weird. So,
but what's really weird is that they only shaved the top of my pubes, and so I still have like a big bushy underball fro. So I think I said on Twitter that my genitals look like they teach Russian lit at like a small liberal arts college.
Take a little off the top.
Yeah.
What else dignity wise? Like it was just like.
First of all, you develop these weird relationships with the nursing crew. Many of whom are very, but you have these intense relationships with people that you will never see again. And God bless him. There was one nurse named Alan. I probably shouldn't use his real name. They're all wonderful. I thank them. But he was clearly like a guy who's on the nurse track, didn't really probably have a lot of outside interests. But when you meet somebody and first of all, they asked me what I did for a living when I was hopped up on fucking drugs. I never would have told them I was a comedian if I was completely lucid. And so, of course, on my chalkboard in my room, they wrote in big letters, comedian.
No, why?
Yeah.
Why did they have to identify you? Did they all then watch your specials?
They have this thing where they wanted to write 2 fun facts. They have like a little space on my whiteboard where they would write 2 fun facts on the other thing I said is that I won a car in a game show once. But I never would have told them I was a comedian.
I didn't know that you won a car in a game show.
Really?
Yeah, I did not know that.
I did.
Do you talk about that in one of your specials? I'm sorry.
I have not yet. I do. I've done it. I've talked about it on storytelling shows a few times. But
how did you win a car in a game show?
It was a VH1 game show called Name That Video. Yeah. Because I grew up sitting in front of MTV for hours and hours. And 2001, I won a Toyota 4Runner on VH1.
And now when you win a car, I always, on a game show, I always heard that you had to pay the taxes or something like that. Is that the deal?
I did, but it was all free money to me. Yeah. I didn't even have a driver's license at the time, so I sold it.
Oh, you did? You sold it right away?
I sold it right back to the dealership. So I'm sure I probably could have gotten more money for it. I remember I made $25,949. That's what I ended up. That's awesome. The check I ended up walking away with.
That's fantastic.
And I had like $21,000 or $22,000 of credit card debt, and it completely fucking saved my ass.
That's huge. That's great.
Dude, when you're that age, when you're in your mid 20s as like a starving, crappy comic, like, it was unbelievable.
I got $1,500 in a class action lawsuit, and Taco Bell gave me salmonella and like 1,200 other people. And I remember at $1,500, I was a freshman in college. It was the greatest thing in the world. I was like, I can't believe I'm getting $1,500 right now.
You could get a check for $500,000 now, and it would not mean as much to you as that $1,500 check did at that time.
Actually. So
let's put this to a test.
So you're in the hospital for 5 days.
But I was just saying this one nurse, he was so nice, but he was the kind of guy who'd be like, comedian, huh? Oh. And he was just like, people need to laugh. Mm-hmm. When people say that, and he would ask me about like, so what do you do? Do you enjoy music? Yeah, I enjoy music.
Well, that's
Alan.
something.
And it got to the point where I was ducking him. Like I would pretend to be asleep when he walked in the room, because he was trying to, because you can like nominate nurses for like being great nurses online. Like
they want to get a good report, so he's like overdoing a bit. Yeah.
And like so he would walk in the room, and I'd be like,
well, he's a huge listener of the show. He's actually here with me. Alan, come on in.
It's so uncomfortable, so awkward.
Man,
if I turn it into a bit, I'll change it to Albert.
So, any other great experiences or interesting experiences, or any COVID-related stuff? Or did you have a roommate?
No, I was by myself. Strangely,
great. I'd be so. That's one of my biggest fear about being in a hospital is I'd have some nightmare of a person to curtain away.
Yeah, I don't know how that worked out, but maybe because of COVID or whatever, I was all by me lonesome.
So how are the drugs? How are the drugs?
The drugs were fine. I am still taking a bunch of them, obviously, but I did not take well to the oxycodone. It made me vomit. So I don't get, none of the drugs I'm taking make me feel like loopy. Unfortunately, I really wish I was kind of hoping to coast on some heavy opioids for a while. I am taking one opioid, a small dosage of hydromorphone, which used to be called Dilaudid. Did you ever watch? I'm sorry?
That doesn't make you loopy?
It does not make you loopy. It makes you constipated.
That's not a fun side effect.
That has been the biggest struggle. Did you ever watch Deadwood?
I didn't.
Oh, it's a great show. But one of the main characters, Alma, the female love interest on Deadwood, was addicted to Dilaudid the first season and a half or so. And it's funny because I don't remember any episodes where she had to struggle to take a shit. they left that part out. So I've been pounding prune juice. Which is strangely effective. It seems like a 19th century remedy.
That works.
Drinking prune juice, but it's I don't know how much your listeners want to hear about this. But
they do. So I'll speak for them. So now, what is the recovery like? Now I'm at a point where the main recovery, and again, I feel great. I feel great. So happy.
Comparatively to how I thought I'd feel, and now. The danger is not doing things that I shouldn't be doing. I'm not supposed to pick anything up heavier than 5 pounds. And sometimes, obviously, if I've just had my medicine, I feel like I can pick things up that are much heavier. And I don't exactly know what kind of danger. I do have a bit of a shoulder problem now, which I'm hoping will work itself out. But and if I pick things that are heavy, I feel it in a way that is not pleasant. And I'm sure that will continue for a long time, especially once I'm off my pain medications. But a lot of it at this point is just kind of stopping myself from doing things that would make me injured or hurt. But I it's probably not as exciting as I might have imagined. I feel great. I feel, I want to do more. Like I have my best friend from high school who's hanging out with me right now because my wife had to go back to the city for a couple of days.
That's awesome.
And he is nice enough just to kind of be around.
Yeah.
In case something heavier than 5 pounds needs to be picked up. But I fucking feel great, man.
So are you guys I imagine that you guys are playing video games together. That's what I mean.
I don't think we play the same video games. He's heavy into like Elder Scrolls and stuff, which is not my thing. But we're probably going to watch shitty old movies. That's sort of the plan for tonight.
So I was going to ask you, like, who has come out? Like, has anybody, what's it like after a surgery like that? Who shows up? I mean, you got a lot of fans and supporters and people, certainly all my listeners have been really asking me, thinking about you. But who's shown up? How's that all been?
It was great over the weekend. When my wife owns this venue, QED, and it's open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and so obviously she had to go to work, and so I kind of just put it out to a bunch of friends of mine, like, hey, come hang out with me in shifts, just so that she could relax at work and not have to worry about me. And it was great. I had a bunch of friends kind of come over for 2 or 3 hour shifts and just literally hang out in my apartment and check their email, or we'd, watch TV or whatever. But I kind of feel like the timing of it was nice in the sense that a lot of my friends haven't really done a lot of socializing because of COVID. So it was kind of an easy way.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that people were kind of happy to help me out.
Do people ask to see the scar?
No one has asked to see the scar yet.
I want to see it.
I will say, because it's about probably 6 or 7 inches long, mm-hmm. and then there's a point underneath it where they had like a drainage tube. And I will say the removal of the drainage tube, not fun. That and the removal of the catheter, not fun.
Oh, the catheter from your penis?
Yes.
And how long was that in? Like
how long?
A few days after the surgery?
They removed the catheter probably 2 days after the surgery. Mm. But the drainage tube was not removed until the morning that I was discharged, I think the morning that I was discharged. And it was super not fun because it's weird because it's a pain that you can't identify. You know what I mean?
I don't.
Like Dude, if I were to punch you in the face or if I were to sock you in the side of the arm, it might hurt, but it's a pain that you're familiar with.
Right,
do you know what I mean? It's you know what that pain means.
Yeah.
Having a fucking 3-foot tube fully yanked from the inside of your body, it's just not, you don't know what that feeling is.
No.
It's so bizarre. So, but yeah, that was not super fun. But anyway, as a result, I think my scar is going to look like a giant exclamation point.
Go. I love it. Well, dude, listen, I'll let you go. I really appreciate you joining me today and talking about all this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if this is interesting to people. I'm just babbling at this point.
It's really interesting because people have certainly gotten to know you and care about you like I have. And it's, it's one of the great things about comics and you for sure is that you'll be very honest and transparent and vulnerable about this on the run up to it and during it, not during it, but after it. And I mean, I was pretty pissed that you didn't join me during it, but I appreciate that. I think it matters. I think, especially with dudes, like not
honestly,
talking about stuff. I think it matters.
If I was really kind of forward thinking 2021 comedian / podcaster type, I would have had my Yeti by Blue microphone on the operating table with me as I went under, and I'd listen to that. I
recorded myself going under. I sang yeah, because usually they say count down from 10. So that they know and so that you kind of know. And I was like, can I sing the Star Spangled Banner instead? And they're like, yeah, sure. And I put my iPhone on my chest before the surgery. It's for my vasectomy. So it was no big deal. And then you hear me go like that. And then I played it on the show.
They took all my electronics away. I would have loved to have done that.
I don't know why they let me do that because on the recording, they were like, we don't know how to stop it. You hear them talking, so they just like took the phone into another room because they couldn't get in to press stop. Anyway,
God, this guy is so bald. It's crazy.
It's so bald. He's the baldest I think we've ever seen. He shaved his own. Well, yeah. Anyway, I'm psyched. I appreciate you talking about it, and it's super interesting.
And next week we'll actually talk about the news.
We'll get back to it about the world. But continued recovery to you, and keep taking pictures of you cozy in your bed with your doggy. That made me so happy.
I can't guarantee I won't do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, brother.
Oh, yeah, Christian Finnegan. So great to have Christian Finnegan back here on Finnegan Fridays. Always fun to talk with him, but the honesty and vulnerability and humor, of course, it's always there with Christian, was great. I hope you appreciated that, and I hope that Christian, you can reach out to him on Twitter or wherever and let him know how much you appreciate he was back here for you. And today's show is sponsored by Indeed.com, which I'm really excited about because I'm continuing my sponsorship with them because so many people have benefited from Indeed.com, including longtime listener Frank Zarinsky, who I just got to read you this email from him about Indeed and how his company, he's a listener, benefited from this. Frank wrote to me and said, Pete, I want to share with you how excited we are to hear that Indeed is a sponsor of your show now, because after we hired everyone that matched our culture and vision at Motion City Media, that's Frank's company, from within our network, Indeed has been the only career search website that we trust and are now using on a recurring basis. We've had a tremendous amount of success finding candidates through Indeed that lined up nicely to job postings without having to sort through endless resumes. Some of our hires from Indeed have been absolute gems. Steven is one of our client service specialists for studio support as an employee and also is one of our most requested real estate photographers. He's super kind, accountable, and a perfect fit at Motion City Media, basically hand-delivered by Indeed.com. Although we run some posts with no ad budget at all, you really see a much larger volume of quality candidates when you promote your listing. The ad dollars go a long way. We often have to end the campaign early because we find our matches in a very short time. How's about that? You know, they give you the copy to read, any company, if you're going to be doing an ad on your podcast or wherever. But I didn't even need to read it because we've got Frank's testimonial. Indeed is the job site that makes hiring easy as 1, 2, 3, post, screen, and interview all on Indeed. Get started right now, folks, with a free $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/standup. Get a $75 credit right now at Indeed.com/standup. Indeed.com/standup. This offer is valid through June 30th. Terms and conditions do apply. Frank, thank you very much for listening and for sending me that. That's awesome. So much better than anything else I could have read, and I'm happy it's working out for you. All right, go to Indeed.com/standup, and they're my sponsor, so go now. Thank you very much. And I can't do it without your support, so if you haven't subscribed yet, please go to Patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or just click on the paid subscription link in the show notes and sign up to support this independent podcast. Okay, Now it's time for my second excellent guest of the show. This is her second time on the show. She joined me, I guess, around this time last year in June, and her paperback of the book that we talked about is now out. It's titled Unholy: How White Christian Nationalists Powered the Trump Presidency and the Devastating Legacy They Left Behind. Sarah Posner is a great journalist whose work has appeared just about everywhere, and she's awesome on Twitter at Sarah Posner. I'm very happy to have her back joining me here on the program to talk about everything that's transpired since. This is a great conversation, in my opinion. I learned so much from her, such great insights and research. Here we go right now, Sarah Posner. Well, there she is. I'm very excited to have Sarah Posner back because when I interview someone for the first time or for their book when it first comes out, it leaves such an impression. I say, well, the next shot will certainly, hopefully, maybe be before, but certainly with the paperback. And it is out. The paperback version of your book, Unholy, is out with a new subtitle, which is very important. Sarah Posner joining me. How White Christian Nationalists Powered the Trump Presidency and the Devastating Legacy They Left Behind. I guess a lot has happened since we talked when he was still president.
Yep, it's been about a year since the hardcover came out, and a lot has happened in that year.
So let's just first talk about your background a little bit to remind folks who and what you've been covering and for this book and just for your career in terms of the Christian right. Tell us a little bit about your background, career, and what and who you've been covering.
So I switched careers when in about the early 2000s, switched careers to being from a lawyer to a journalist. And I started covering the Christian right, which I had studied and written about in college, and covered that through the Trump presidency, through the Obama presidency, and then through the Bush presidency, through the Obama presidency, and through the Trump presidency. So I had covered the Christian right in many different contexts, both in terms of their support for Republican presidential candidates and their role in choosing Republican presidential candidates in the primaries. I covered their backlash to the Obama presidency, and generally, more broadly, their role in shaping the legal landscape on church-state separation issues and reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights, and just their role in shaping policy in Washington.
And then Donald Trump comes to town, and you cover this so well in your book. But I feel like the most important question you can answer so well is about why they support him, given everything that he is. And I asked you this question the last time, but it's a great, important, I think the most important question, but you can add to it now with even through the pandemic. They followed him and supported him through the pandemic and through the election, through the big lie, and through the insurrection. I mean, a lot has developed. So if you ever thought they would turn their back on Donald Trump, now, I think we know more than ever they won't. What changed? What developed? Why did they support him?
Well, they supported him in 2016 because he represented this strong man figure who was there to save Christian America from secularism, from feminism, from democracy, really. I mean, they wouldn't admit that, right? But I think what they liked about him was his assault on democracy, because they see the writing on the wall. They see that their policy ideas and their overall political and cultural agenda is not popular with the American public, yet they need a politician who can usher all of this through as representing it as the real America or the true Christian America. And Trump was willing to do that for them in a way that other Republican candidates had never done, right? So you have people like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio who might cite Bible verses or talk about their own Christianity all the time, but they weren't as strongman and powerful and expressing their cultural grievances as much as Trump did. And so what developed over time was their representation of him as a divinely ordained figure who was chosen by God to save America at this critical juncture in its history. So he doesn't have to be a Christian, because sometimes God chooses an unlikely leader when a nation is facing great strife. And that was kind of the mythology that developed around him, and it stuck. And throughout his presidency, he was portrayed as the most pro-religious freedom president, the most pro-life president, the most pro-Christian, pro-Israel president. And so when he started laying the groundwork for the big lie and also for the insurrection, he maintained the support of the Christian right. Yeah. So not a lot changed from, June of 2016 when they decided to rally around him and support him as the nominee. And here we are, June of 2021.
I think it's so
5 years later.
Reading your book and your work in general is so important, I think, especially for liberals, because we, all people, look at things through our own lens, through our own moral lens, and I get so frustrated with people. How could you support him? He's a monster. He's a terrible person. I find myself doing that over and over still, even though I know, because I learned in your book. It's so important that you understand at least where they're coming from, which is that they believe. They believe he was chosen. He was ordained. Tell us a little bit about why they believe that, who told them that, and how Trump has gone right along with it. That's right. I must have been chosen. I'm the chosen one. He actually believes that, I think.
Right. Well, I think something that's important to understand about the development of the Christian right and Trump's use of it is that he, more than other prior Republican candidates for president, really tapped into the televangelist, prosperity gospel, New Apostolic Reformation wing of evangelicalism. And let me break that down a little bit, because I know that was a lot of words that maybe some people are unfamiliar with. So, I mean, if you can find a televangelist on your TV preaching the prosperity gospel anytime, or on YouTube or whatever. They're telling you God wants you to be rich. If you donate to me, if you tithe to me, the pastor, God will bless you with a supernatural return on your investment. That's basically the core of the prosperity gospel. And then the New Apostolic Reformation is another movement within charismatic Pentecostal Christianity, which basically says there's modern day apostles and prophets whose role it is to receive prophecy from God and tell you about it. Tell you what God is prophesying for the future, visions and miracles and what have you. And that they are modern day apostles who have to restore America as a Christian nation and to transform every community in America and transform every government, state, local, national government to being run by Christian principles or a biblical worldview, or however they might phrase it.
And I think it's so important that people understand to do that, to transform every community, to proselytize, to convert, to do whatever they need to be done. They don't actually believe in doing it through what constitutional means, democratic means. They don't believe that, which is why, they generally don't support democracy. I think it's important that people start to understand, especially those in the mainstream media. I keep hearing people, question Republicans. Why are you supporting this big lie? They don't also believe in democracy. They don't believe in the elections. Right. They don't believe in it because of what you're saying, because of their religion. And I don't want to name names exactly because I don't know exactly who thinks this, but that's how true is what I just said. I'm giving you my opinion, but they're spreading, they're transforming communities, not through democracy, not through supporting our Constitution as it's written, but through whatever means they can, cheating.
Well, I do think that there are a lot of grassroots evangelical and Pentecostal and charismatic Christians who do, maybe not necessarily are particularly involved in politics and may be proselytizing, on the street or just in their community, but are not necessarily...
to be fair, they do it by any means possible. Yes.
Right. So there's the face-to-face proselytization that goes on, and has gone on forever, right? But then there is the way in which the Christian right has basically engaged in a decades-long attack on the separation of church and state by basically... The legal attack has been to undermine the legal or jurisprudential interpretations of the wall of separation, of the Establishment Clause of the Constitution, to erode that and instead elevate the religion clause so that it's okay for the government to, quote unquote, protect somebody's religious freedom rather than the other way around. Like they say that they would claim that the separation of church and state doesn't mean that the government has no religion or proposes no religion. It just means that the government doesn't interfere in the activities of churches, right? So it's okay for them, in fact, preferable to them, that the government express a certain religious view, that the government govern and legislators legislate and the president act according to what they would call a biblical worldview, which would mean, for example, you do not, you're a federally funded or federally regulated adoption or foster care provider, and your religion says, I can't place a child with a same-sex couple, and that you should be entitled to do that. So a lot of these religion wars are really at their core about this question of whether do we have a separation of church and state, and does the religious freedom of these Christian objectors to LGBTQ rights or to reproductive rights, does that get elevated above the rights of other people?
Well, I always think of LGBT rights, equality. I think of just gender equality, and I think of women's reproductive rights, which is, I guess, gender equality as well. But as the mission, as the culture war dividers for years. But now I think it's also another issue that's probably the most important issue, is their belief in democracy itself. Who chooses the president? Who chooses your congressman? Is it the people in your community who are registered to vote, or is it God? So what do they believe? And sorry for saying they. I know you'll give me a nuance as to what they believe, because now it's elections are the thing that I'm most concerned about, not as much about women's reproductive rights and equality. We have to start with elections before we get to all the other issues.
Right. It seems like we're at the very basic core of what makes a democracy, and we've got to protect that. Just like that we have elections, and that we have elections that aren't tainted by cyber ninjas getting a subpoena so that they can investigate the voting machines in Maricopa County, Arizona, right? So I think that one of the things that you have to understand about white evangelicals and their role in the Christian right and in the Republican Party is that many of them back in the 70s were not propelled into electoral politics by family values or Roe v. Wade, but instead about this idea of religious freedom in the face of school desegregation. So it was about race, right? And similarly, all of these election so-called disputes are also about race, because they are supporting Trump's big lie. They are supporting the idea that in places like Detroit or Philadelphia or Atlanta, that there was some kind of voter fraud. Similarly, they're supporting these state-level voter suppression bills that are being passed in certain states, which are clearly aimed at suppressing the vote in communities of color. They oppose federal efforts to restore, to prevent voter suppression and restore the right to vote in Congress. And so if you kind of compare that, right, so like they talk a lot about religious freedom now, and they talk about it in the context of LGBTQ rights and reproductive rights mostly, right? But back in the 70s, they talked a little bit about abortion, but the thing that was really getting them jazzed up was this antipathy to the idea that the federal government might have something to say to Christian schools about non-discrimination. And that was seen as a violation of their religious freedom. And that was about race. Yeah, I mean, and again, we're back to another place where it's about race, and someone has come along who built up this reputation, Trump built up this reputation in the Christian right as being willing to do anything to save Christian America. And that really stuck even after the loss. And so there has to be, some kind of enemy or somebody who's against Christians, or in their view, what Christians are. And here, it's all around the election and what they would call election integrity.
Always using religion to put themselves above as white people. I mean, I just interviewed Clint Smith about his new book, and just thinking about the Civil War and a lot of the justification for slavery based in religion. I mean, there's a lot to talk about there.
Absolutely.
What role did the people that you covered, that we talked about the last time, that you write about in your book, play in the insurrection? Because I'm pretty sure, I know we talked about Paula White, who you write about, and I'm pretty sure she was there. She was there on January 6th, wasn't she?
Right. So people will remember that Trump gave a speech on the other side of the National Mall from where the Capitol is, at the Ellipse. And that was the speech in which he told his followers to fight like hell. Not a lot of attention was given to the fact that Paula White opened that rally with the prayer. She was the one who opened it all up. And basically, giving a blessing to Trump's speech, which is, was clearly inciting the crowd to go do something.
And he had chosen her. You talked about this as.
Oh, she's very close to him. I mean, they have been friends for probably close to 2 decades now. And she was seen as his spiritual advisor. She had an informal or kind of advisor role in his office of faith-based partnerships. So yeah, they are very close. It was not like there was some random pastor who was tapped to give the prayer at that rally. She is probably closer to him in terms of his the religious people around him, closer to him than anybody else.
Eric Metaxas was involved as well, wasn't he?
Right. So it wasn't just January 6th. There was like a lead up to January 6th where religious actors were basically getting people fired up about the election having been stolen, Stop the Steal, and working with Stop the Steal. And so I did a story after January 6th about the Jericho March, which was like kind of, I wouldn't call it really an organization. It was just kind of a group of people who got together and organized these marches on the National Mall, around the Capitol, and then there were local ones. And basically they were using this analogy of when Joshua came to Jericho and God made the walls fall down. And they analogized that to the deep state, that they were going to make the walls of the deep state fall down, and then we would come down, and we would know the real result of the election. And they had a very big rally on the mall in mid-December. And that was clearly aimed at all this Stop the Steal stuff, like that kind of generated a lot of the fuel around what culminated in January 6th. And Eric Metaxas was the MC. Eric Metaxas is a radio host, pundit, author, very popular in evangelical circles, and has been one of the big promoters of the big election lie. And the event was organized by two people who were at the time political appointees in the Department of Health and Human Services. So they were on the federal payroll, and they had organized this event, which basically said the election had been stolen from Donald Trump. And they both said, one of these individuals was evangelical and the other one was Catholic. And they both said that God had spoken to them and told them that they needed to, basically save the election. And they had a whole lineup of religious speakers. They had Stuart Rhodes from Oath Keepers speak at this event. And it was many of the speakers were quite incendiary.
That guy, Eric Metaxas, I don't know if I told you this, but I was at his fall of 2019, and I was at a very small gathering of people invited to this cocktail party at this guy's house. I'll tell you off the record who it was, but I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who was going to be there. And so I'm sitting there talking to somebody, and he walks in the room, and whatever I was saying some joking about religion or something. And he comes in the room and he says, "Oh, are we making fun of religion? Is that what we're doing?" And I looked at the guy and I looked around because I didn't really know who was there. And I just looked at him. I go, "Yes. Yes. Is that a problem? Like, who are you?" I then it was one of these weird things. I then went to the bathroom to Google him and I was like, "Good God, who?" That's my story.
Okay, so I need to know the story of how you and Eric Metaxas ended up at the same cocktail party.
I've told some listeners, but I feel a little weird putting it on the record. So I will tell you as soon as I hit stop because it's bizarre. But let me get back to your book and your work because I think, how much overlap is there with all of these folks and the QAnon theories? Because it seems the more research I've read that you don't have to be religious to be QAnon, but a lot of people are very religious that also believe in that. There's a lot of overlap, and there's so many of those prophecies, and it all kind of falls in line. So, what do you have to say about that? And since your book has been published, I guess.
Right. QAnon had not really taken off while I was writing the book, right? It was there, but it hadn't become the thing that it later became. But it has been documented through public opinion surveys that evangelicals are pretty susceptible to QAnon. I can't remember what the numbers are, but higher rates of belief in QAnon than other religious demographics among white evangelicals. And anecdotally, I've spoken to a lot of, evangelical leaders or pastors who were very concerned about the level of belief in QAnon among their congregants or in their social media networks, many of whom aren't really necessarily aware that what they're ingesting or sharing on social media is QAnon content. But that raises the question, obviously some of them are all in and, getting very involved in falling down the online rabbit hole of QAnon. But it raises the question of, well, why are white evangelicals more susceptible to QAnon than other people? And I think part of it is that for so many decades, they've been marinating in other kinds of conspiracy theories, including or just belief systems that rely on prophecy not coming true, and then you kind of reboot when the prophecy doesn't come true. And that's really basically what like end times prophecy is all about. When you hear evangelicals talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ, and is it going to happen? It's going to happen on God's timing, but I've gotten a prophecy, that this thing is going to happen, something that Putin is doing or something that Iran is doing or something that's happening in Israel, as all the signs point to this, that, or the other thing. So they're kind of used to that kind of, that kind of like prophecy, failure of prophecy, coming back and making another prophecy. Yeah. So that's familiar to them. But I think also, if you go back and look at the Christian right's role in, for example, the Bill Clinton impeachment, a lot of what animated them was the idea that the Clintons were pedophiles and criminals and sexual abusers of children, which is the core.
I did not know that there was that whole pedophile claim and accusation that far. Then I did not know that.
Yep.
Oh, so that's not new.
That is not new.
And it's just wild too, because you see who the real pedophiles are all the time. You're like, go after them. Go after the Catholic Church. I mean, it's institutionalized in other. You don't have to go after people that aren't actually committing these crimes. There's tons of people that are doing this sex trafficking. Go after them, including a lot of folks who Trump, his family, his organization, his friends, Epstein, and so on.
Well, so another factor is this save the children theme that's very prevalent in QAnon. So people think that they are personally going to save the children if they get involved. And this is very similar to anti-Planned Parenthood activism that has come out of the Christian right over the past few decades. I don't know if you remember these very deceitfully obtained and edited videos that these conservative activists put out,
James
claiming that Planned Parenthood was harvesting baby parts, or that they were trafficking young girls who had, were coming into helping somebody traffic young girls who had come into the clinic. And these are the same sorts of fears and anxieties that QAnon seeks to stoke among its followers by saying that, you've got to save these innocent children from being, harvesting baby parts. Well, one of the that they claimed that Planned Parenthood was harvesting baby parts. QAnon claims that Hillary Clinton, eats children, eats babies, like really wild, crazy stuff like that. But, you talk to evangelicals who are against QAnon, but realize what's happening with their evangelical brethren, and they see all this too. They see the connection between the end times prophecies and the anti-Planned Parenthood activism, and this idea that, it is your job as a Christian to save the children.
The latest prophecy, by the way, I'm sure you're familiar with it. I'm trying to have any fun I can with it by arguing I'm going to be, quote, reinstated to something. Right now I have a cold, so I'm going to be reinstated to my good health. But that Trump is going to be reinstated. He's going to be reinstated. We're hearing this from a lot of the wacko people who support him, right? I mean, that falls right in line with everything you're reporting, writing about unholy, these prophecies. He's coming back. He'll be back.
Well, what's interesting to me, I was reading the Washington Post coverage of this very thing this morning, and it's portrayed as Trump believes that he will be reinstated, right? But I'm not sure he believes that. I think he believes that if he stokes his followers to believe it, that they're going to create a lot of chaos around this date. He's hoping for his followers to do something around specific dates.
Did that with January 6th.
Right. And so, this kind of coincides with him shutting down his blog that nobody read. And him being very upset about not having a presence on social media anymore. And so, what's another way of getting your followers riled up if they're not reading your blog and you can't be on Twitter, is to kind of stoke this idea that there's some prophecy or reason why you would be reinstated in August so that everybody can spend the summer freaking out about it.
And I will. I want to try to understand why after they tried to hang Mike Pence and Donald Trump threw him under the bus, some, at least in the Christian right, and we'll forget them, Mike Pence didn't abandon Donald Trump. Mike Pence's brother.
What about Mike Pence's own brother?
His brother. I didn't even know these. The congressman voted against investigating January 6th, right? And voted against, I think, confirming the results of the election as well. Actually, I'm not sure of that vote. But regardless, what about Mike Pence? Trump put him on the ticket to get these folks who you wrote about to support him. He is always been a dyed-in-the-wool religious guy. Is he evangelical now, or is he was Catholic now? He's evangelical. I always forget. But they tried to hang him, Sarah. What did that do?
Well, I think that for the leadership of the Christian right, so people who are in the leadership positions of these policy advocacy organizations, Mike Pence has been their ally and friend far longer than Donald Trump was, right? And I think that they're just trying to have it both ways, right? They're just trying to keep their friendship with Pence and not say much about what happened on January 6th, and also maintain their unvarnished support for Donald Trump. And I think that one of the ways that some evangelical leaders, and thinking about Robert Jeffress, who's a megachurch pastor in Dallas and is very close to Trump. They're very good friends. And he basically came out and condemned what happened at the Capitol. I condemn violence. Trump is entitled to his opinion about whether the election was stolen, Jeffress says. But I condemn the violence at the Capitol. And I think this is the way that they've threaded that needle. We condemn the violence that happened at the Capitol. We don't want to rehash it through a commission. It was wrong to impeach Trump, and we'll continue to support his big lie, but we'll kind of wiggle around January 6th.
The other thing I think that you teach us in your book and in your work is, and important again to liberals to understand, is they're not even seeing the news that we're seeing. They're not reading the news that I think people know certain versions of this, and people generally realize that we're siloed off, and we tend to go to the outlets that we like and respect and agree with more, our biases and so on. But we're talking about a different, like, they believe that it's the devil, like that Jake Tapper, John King, I don't know, Rachel Maddow, whoever they want, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, and even Fox News now isn't good enough.
For some, Fox News isn't radical enough. This is a trend that I started to see even before.
Really?
Trump. Yeah, there were people who thought that Fox News didn't go far enough, which is, I think, part of the reason why Fox News has been trying to go further. But I think people sort of liberals generally understand the Fox News phenomenon, that like there's, a segment of the population and a huge segment of the Republican Party who watch Fox News, and they think that CNN is fake news, or I've heard people call it the communist news network, which is so, ridiculous.
Yeah, when I worked at CNN and I was like doing their man on the street stuff, people would just constantly, I'd have the mic flag and they would yell Clinton News Network, Communist News Network, and Chicken Noodle News Network. And that was like 2011. So Right, exactly.
But I think what people don't understand is that on top of Fox News, and now on top of Newsmax and OAN, has been this existing evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic media ecosystem that a lot of white evangelical voters kind of have been marinating in for a long time. And so they watch this religious programming. A lot of these religious channels also have news. They watch the Christian Broadcasting Network, the Trinity Broadcasting Network, Daystar, and then a lot of these figures who appear on these channels then have their kind of side podcasts, or they also have their YouTube channel. So there's lots and lots of content that reinforces a lot of this stuff. And when I'm working on a story and I immerse myself in it for a while to work on the story, sometimes you come out and you're like, I missed the real news for a week or so, and wow, when I catch up, this alternative universe was pretty intense.
I want to be there for you when you're coming out. I want to know what the process is to try to synthesize back into reality. In your book too, you published it, I think, before the pandemic, right? Before COVID.
Well, it came out during the pandemic, but it was, done.
Right, you turned it in, and I think that there's so much more to be said and talked about now by you in terms of what people believe about COVID itself, where it started, how it started, why it's, and then most importantly, I think right now is to talk about the vaccines. I mean, this Christian, I don't know exactly much about him, but this guy, Rick Wiles, who had been preaching against the vaccine for a long time. Dude's on a ventilator right now, like got COVID. He's sick. And we've seen that with a lot of others, but it's crazy. The statistics of those who have not gotten vaccinated are in line with politics overwhelmingly with those who are religious. And I've seen article after article of churches, evangelical churches, wrestling with their parishioners, with their followers about this. The leaders are trying to tell them to get vaccinated, but they're still not. What do you, I mean, there's so much to talk about with that. I don't know where to start, Sarah, but what about what they also believe regarding the pandemic and the vaccines?
Well, with regard to the pandemic, from the start, federal, state, and local restrictions were seen by many evangelical churches and many evangelical advocates. I'm talking about legal advocates, lawyers for Christian right legal organizations as restrictive of religious freedom. They claimed that it was targeted at them to shut down their churches during the pandemic. A lot of them challenged these in court and were successful, particularly after Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed to the Supreme Court. So there were dozens of court challenges to COVID restrictions. Even though the restrictions applied across the board to different kinds of businesses and organizations, they claimed that it was targeted at churches and restrictive of their religious freedom. So there was that. Just the whole idea that the restrictions weren't necessary, that it was the government again restricting the religious freedom of Christians. And then there was a lot of belief in either that it was a hoax because they were listening to Donald Trump, and also that as a believer, God will protect you from illness.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people in those videos. You know, I'm not worried about it. I'm bathed in Jesus' blood.
Exactly. Or that if you did get it, or if you were sick, that God would heal you, which is definitely part of your prosperity gospel. That's why it's sometimes called the health and wealth gospel, because believers will be rich, believers will have good health. And then there was a lot of conspiracy theories just about the origin of the virus, which now with the renewed attention on the lab leak theory, of course, is going to spawn an endless number of new conspiracy theories about that. And then the vaccine was, again, you have this situation where people are believing in things like it's the mark of the beast, or that, I don't want to put something like that in my body, or it came from the government, or there's a billion different reasons why somebody might reject the vaccine, but there's a very high rate of vaccine rejection among evangelicals, even though very prominent evangelical figures urged people to get the vaccine. Franklin Graham said Jesus himself would get the vaccine. But still, it's distressing, because in communities where there's a very high proportion of white evangelicals in the population as a whole, it's going to be harder for that community to get to that, whatever the percentage you'd need to, stamp out the virus, whether you call it herd immunity or,
a lot of states and companies have come up with promotions from, free college to money to Krispy Kreme donuts and Anheuser-Busch. I mean, maybe churches can come up with some kind of incentive, but I feel like it's so ideological that they don't, I don't know how hard they're trying to convince their followers to get vaccinated, because so much of this goes against the grain of their bigger, or it's not as effective. And so I wanted to ask you about, how do you know when these people are grifting? Because Donald Trump is going to say he's going to run again forever so that he can raise money to pay his legal bills. I'm guessing there's so much of it that's a grift. Can you ever prove it? You can't really prove why they're saying the things they're saying, doing what they're doing.
Well, especially in the televangelism world, getting money is a huge part of the entire program, right? Like, yes, they'll say it's about a Bible teaching that day, or, this is the Bible verse we're going to be talking about today, or I'm going to be talking about a prophecy or something, right? But at the end of the day, they're always asking for money, right? And so I think, Trump, the alignment, between Trump's mode and methods of raising money and the mode and methods of televangelists raising money is very similar. Don't miss this great offer. You can be a member of this, that, or the other thing. You can be a special partner, or you can be a covenant partner. These are a lot of the same kinds of tactics that Trump uses. Now, of course, not all evangelicals believe in televangelism or prosperity gospel. A lot of them don't. A lot of them think it's a heresy. But this is a bigger and bigger part of the evangelical world.
Well, Sarah, I won't take up any more of your time, but I love talking to you. I love following you on Twitter. I love reading your articles. I'm super excited to have discovered this. And when a listener, thanks to Dan McDonald said he saw your tweet that you published the paperback, and then he said, "Hey, I just booked Sarah Posner for you." I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he told me. And so I reached out to you and was very excited to talk to you again. Are you planning on doing more of this reporting on this issue inside of this world? Are you going to continue doing this? Because anybody could, I would be fine with you moving to anything else, because it must be very difficult and challenging for you. But I also want you to keep talking about it, because you do such a great job covering them.
I will probably keep covering it.
Good. It's so important. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Congratulations on the paperback coming out. I hope everybody goes and buys it. And now I'm going to hit stop and tell you who was at that party. All right. And if you reach out to me, I'll tell you who is there as well. I mentioned it one time at a Zoom, but never on the podcast. All right, folks. That's it. That's all I got for the week. And I really appreciate you listening. Go to Indeed.com/standup. Check out everything they have to offer. And thank you so much to Christian Finnegan. So great to have him back. And of course, Sarah Posner. Go get her book, Unholy. Sign up for a subscription to this podcast. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes and be a part of our community. Hang out with us every Thursday night at 8. Join us on the Discord platform so that you're never alone if you're a member of our community. Also, of course, do the 5-star review and write a review at Apple Podcasts, because that's a really important way to grow this podcast. Thank you so much for your support this week. Hopefully I'll be feeling better enough to do the full program all week next week. Thank you so much for listening. I love you. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Take it away, John Carroll.
Stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.